Anyway, welcome, Jonathan. So happy to have you here. It's noon here in Toronto, so I guess that's supper time for you guys in
That's right.
the
Yep.
UK.
Late evening, but really happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just to give us a tiny bit of background on you, what's your focus? What keeps you going?
What keeps me going? I love working with people, and I've been fortunate enough to do that for a long time now as a sports psychologist and then as an executive coach and a team coach in business. The thing at the moment is I think we're at a really interesting time of society and time of history where the way we think about work, the way capitalism works, the way people make a living, really going through some big changes at the moment. And I'm really excited about that and the potential that comes to make life better for people.
So you mentioned a couple of things that I already want to dive into, but I'm gonna put the gate up at least for us to anchor the conversation to. One of the beliefs that we have here at Purple Voodoo is that whole human beings show up in the workplace. That a cleaved off worker doesn't show up in the workplace. And that there's a necessity to not just recognize that, but to fully embrace that when it comes to leading people, enabling people, and designing and sustaining environments and ecosystems for people to work in. So when I say that statement, whole humans show up in the workplace, how does that resonate for you?
Oh, really strongly. And but it also raises some really interesting questions, because I agree that we always show up as whole human beings. The trouble is, though, that, and you mentioned ecosystems and organizations, the trouble is that the way a lot of organizations are set up, it means that the human who shows up isn't always a very good human. And so I think there's something about the way organizations are set up, the way leaders lead, that needs to happen to enable the best of who we are to show up.
Interesting. So tell me more a little bit about that, the not best human showing up.
Well, if you think about a lot of workplaces that I encounter, and I'm sure you do the same, they're very task-driven places. They're very busy. People don't have much time. There's a lot of demands on them. They don't have time to stop and think. There's a constant pressure to perform, to deliver, to execute. When you put a person in that sort of environment, and it doesn't matter whether that person's a saint, that kind of environment is going to drive particular behaviours in people. And those behaviours are going to dehumanize the person themselves, but they're also going to dehumanize their colleagues. So one of the things we know, that when people are under pressure and when people get very results focused, I'll say we, because I'm no different, we stop seeing people as people and we start seeing them as objects. And they are objects who are either enablers to me delivering on what I need or blockers for me getting to where I need to get to.
Yeah.
And that's really dehumanizing. And from that space, which isn't me choosing to be that way, that's me responding to a particular type of environment with a particular type of a workplace, I'm going to go that way. And I'm going to dehumanize myself and dehumanize others.
Yeah, it becomes a bit of a chicken and the egg, right? Because within that environment, you are developing, I'll use that word loosely, the future leaders who take that same position and mindset as they move up and across the organization in the same dehumanized fashion.
Absolutely. That's the culture. The culture around here is that we focus on results, we deliver, we look after our clients, we hit our profits, and that's what matters. And so, as I said, the human that turns up is a human that doesn't really recognize other human beings.
Right. So how do we adjust for that? Or where do you see the biggest opportunity? Because, to say, in fact, interestingly, I just did a culture workshop yesterday. And one of the things that we talked about was that this is an organization who has a list of really meaningful and important value words that nobody would argue are great ideological states of being.
Yeah.
And the question is, of course, well, if you have these words and everyone agrees that those values make sense and that would be a nice place to work, why is the culture, in fact, not representative of that list of words, right? And we talked a lot about, well, what is it about the practice, the day-to-day or hour by hour or minute by minute decisions around behaviors that either line up or don't line up to those values? And how do we recognize that as humans, it's tough when we're in the system and the pace of change is crazy, and the pace of work is crazy, and the dehumanizing process or experience is constant. How do you even step back? And even just noticing, wow, how do we do that?
Yeah.
So for you, where is the opportunity to put a sort of a nail in the wheel to slow it down and perhaps jolt people into the realization of that even?
Well, look, that's such a big question. And I think there's different ways of answering it. There's an interior answer and there's an external way of answering it. The external answer, I think, goes to really having some hard conversations with the leaders or the owners of the business to say, what is really important to you? And are you willing to shift how you run this business? Are you willing to actually create space for people? Are you really willing to give people space to make mistakes, to learn, to develop? Are you willing to take the foot off the gas in terms of driving for outcomes the whole time? And that's really tough for people to do, but that's part of it.
Right.
Is that then gives you the chance to maybe make some external changes to how do people get reward around here? At the end of the month, I want money in my pocket. What do I need to do to get that money? So you start to need to go back to the very basic drives about particularly money. What gets rewarded?
Yeah.
If I want to get promoted around here, what do I really need to do? Not what do I pay lip service to do, but what do I really have to do? Yeah. So they're the external dimensions. Then the internal thing, the internal change, you sort of alluded to it. It's that capacity to stop. It's developing individually the capacity for people to press a pause button and just stop and just take a breath and just start to notice, what is it I'm doing right now? How am I feeling right now? Who are these people I'm dealing with? And once people start to create that capacity to pause and to take stock, they start to create some distance internally. And there's this really powerful concept. I don't know if you've come across it. Jennifer Garby-Berger talks about this a lot. There's the difference between having and had by. So when I'm had by a belief or had by the culture, that's what's driving me. I've become blind to it. So my belief that I'll perform at any cost or any cost is worth paying. When I'm had by that, I don't see it anymore. It's a belief that's gone behind my eyes and it's just operating. And I'm blind and I'm being driven by that belief that whatever it takes, I'll do it. Having that belief happens when I pause and I stop and I say, hang on, what's going on here? Oh, hang on. I'm operating with the belief that says any price is worth paying. I'm having this belief. Now that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now I can start to have a dialogue with that. I can start to ask, is that really what I want? Is that in alignment with our values? Is that helpful? Yeah. And I start to have a choice about whether I continue to drive with that belief or that assumption, or whether I put it aside and try something else.
I love that. And the cool thing is, and I'm sure you see it, I mean, we're likely quite similar in our insatiable curiosity about all this stuff, which is why we do what we do and love what we do. The notion of accountability. I mean, accountability is also one of the biggest buzzwords in any organization, whether it be a corporate organization, nonprofit, sports teams, doesn't really matter, accountability. And often there is resistance to that because of the ecosystem. Well, yes, but ecosystem. Yes, but environment. Yes, but. And that's true, that it is more challenging in a non-supportive or non-aligned ecosystem. And yet that notion of awareness, of bringing that to the fore and recognizing, how is my behavior that thing? Does that make me happy, not happy, content, not content, aligned, not aligned? That is true accountability, right? As you say, I'm making a choice to behave in alignment with this thing that I'm now looking at with a little more objectivity. Yeah. But even just that pause, we were talking about this yesterday, the notion to slow down in order to speed up. In our word of hyper, and I don't even know if it's progression, because sometimes I think we're just going like this.
I don't think
but
it is.
Hyper movement. We do need to slow down in order to speed up, or slow down to at least keep pace with it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that accountability comes down to individual choice. It really does. And
we do have that free will, right?
We've got choice.
Yeah.
We've all got choice. As you say, it might be really difficult. It might be countercultural. It might be career limiting. But each person's got a choice if they stop to think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think one of the really interesting questions then is, so how do you help people make that change? How do you help bring about that in an organisation? If you think about that from an organisational point of view, that can be really overwhelming. How do we shift this whole organisation? And but there's this and there's this and there's so many things, and the shareholders will say this and the owners will. So then, if you come right back to the individual, you say, okay, great, I can help this individual shift. What's in between?
Yeah.
And I think what lies in between is leveraging the power of teams. So if you leverage the power of people who work together for a reason, we all know the definition of a team. It's people working together in pursuit of a common goal. But it just strikes me that's such a powerful vehicle for this sort of change, because you can help individuals in a team develop that kind of awareness and develop the capacity for making a choice. But if you do it well, you can also enable them to support each other in doing that.
Yeah.
You can support them to hold each other to account, or to prompt each other. Where are you right now? What's going on? Oh, okay. Oh, crikey. Thank you. So it just strikes me that this is a really fertile ground. If we're thinking about helping organisations shift, teams are kind of a useful parameter for that to happen with. It's a bit Goldilocks, not too big, not too small. It's the right vehicle for people to be developed, to really develop that accountability muscle to support each other in doing it, to see the benefits within the context of the team.
And is that your approach when you work with organizations or leaders explicitly, is to say, let's not focus here or necessarily focus here, but let's cultivate that fertile ground? And this is a methodology to do that? Or?
Oh, absolutely. And that doesn't exclude looking at the whole organization, and it doesn't exclude working with individuals. But I think I'm increasingly convinced that if you really want to make a difference, it's a powerful way of doing it.
Yeah, and it's almost analogous to other grassroots success stories where you have, whether it's social consciousness or community areas of focus, where they start with a small group of people, like-minded, who want to do something, and they do that, and then especially in this day and age, they might find out through social media, or, hey, this guy over here is also doing that well. So how do we then leverage that? And you leverage the momentum and the energy and the insights and the learning, and then that feeds back into more insights and more energy.
Absolutely.
And then people looking at from the outside going, hey, that team looks really happy over there. Like, what are they doing?
I want some of that. What are they having? Yeah.
And interestingly, my experience is sometimes there is a possible disconnect even from the leader of a team. They might not be in a place of receptivity to do the looking at the thing. Their team, however, might be. And oftentimes I've said to them, well, what is stopping you? I mean, ideally, wouldn't it be great if you were all on the same page? But what's stopping you from beginning to have those individual practices and collective practices just as a small team, regardless of whether the leader is ready to be involved or not?
Absolutely. I think it's about, I think I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty rare to be invited in right from the top, from the CEO, and be given carte blanche to work with the whole organisation.
Very.
I'd love if that happened more often, but more often my experience is coming in somewhere into the middle of organisation, or into a business unit, or into a part of it. And that said, there's a natural boundary around the influence I can have. And within that, it's either a team or a number of teams. But you're absolutely right. If you wait for everything to be perfect, or you wait for your CEO to be on board, probably nothing's ever going to happen.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if it was.
Right.
But in the real world, I think often we encounter imperfect situations, and we've got to work with the people who are there and with their level of willingness and engagement.
I agree with you. And that is, in fact, my experience, is very rarely brought in at the top. Sometimes brought in at the individual level from an executive coaching relationship, or someone who's a new leader and says, look, I'm not getting the support I need to really understand what do I do to lead people. I was good at doing this job. Now all of a sudden I'm leading people doing this job.
Yeah.
But the most frequently I'm brought into a team organization to help them. And I think it's actually really cool. I often will say to them, imagine if you could remediate the challenges that you have just in your own little empire here, that your actual experience at work would improve very significantly. And likely there would be some peripheral improvement with your cross-functional team parts, or the other folks that you bump up with, your external client base, perhaps. And even if nothing filters down or up or across, your own work experience is just going to feel better for you as a
Yeah.
human being.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, look, I'm right on board with you. I think it's about working, particularly with leaders in that situation, and realise that I often use the example that one of the things a good leader does is kind of get their arms around the team. And I used to say it was about putting an umbrella up and stopping stuff coming down, but that's not quite right. This is a bit of a medical analogy, but in our brains, in the spinal cord, there's a thing called the blood-brain barrier, which protects the brain and the spinal cord. So it stops toxins getting through, but it also lets through nutrients. And I think a good leader is like the blood-brain barrier around the team. They let through the good stuff. They let through the nutrients. They let through what's going to help the team thrive, but they stop the toxins.
Yeah.
And when you do that, I think a leader's got a huge capacity to help his or her team create an ecosystem that works with the right kind of barriers around it, which then let the good stuff out to influence others, but kind of protect it at the same time.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I've never heard that before. That's great.
Feel free to use it.
Oh, I will. I love it. I love it. And the interesting thing too is it makes me think of the connectivity, and I think there's a misunderstanding or a belief that you either focus on the human beings and the human condition and the whole human, or you focus on results and measurement and process and discipline. And yet what I believe is that it's kind of that stuff over humans, because humans is the common denominator that create all those processes and areas of discipline and rigor and strategy and tactics and things. And if they don't design it and roll it out and support it and evaluate it with that human creature in mind, likely even that won't be as successful or efficient as possible.
Oh, look, 100%. And I mean, the other really important thing to remember here is that if you ask people what makes you happy at work, most people will give the answers that people give tend to fall into two buckets. One is, I do worthwhile work. I help my clients. I achieve results. I see progress. And the other is, I enjoy my workmates. I have fun. So both are important. People go to work to be productive. People go to work to achieve things. So this is the trouble. This is not about demonizing the task or demonizing profits or demonizing, having a well-run factory. Far from it. That's part of having a human workplace, is that people can feel motivated by being productive at what they do and producing whatever it is, but producing stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you can't separate the two. Yeah, it's both together is where the power comes.
It's both. And what makes me think of it, and is directly related to your sports psychology discipline, is the notion that humans inherently want to achieve things. They want to compete. They want to learn. They want to grow. They want to progress. They want to, the pursuit is the happiness, right? Sometimes it's the goal, but sometimes it's the pursuit of it. Like, you get to the top of the mountain, you're like, okay, I'm here, yay. But really it was the climb and the struggle and the learning and the companionship through that. And that's interesting when we think of the world of work. And I'm going to tie in what you said right off the top too, and the notion of capitalism or not. Sometimes we start demonizing a notion of capitalism or of corporate success or of focusing on work. But what if those same things actually bring value to the human experience, or value to the society, or value to the collective consciousness? Like, I think it's difficult to say, and this is partisan politics these days too, right? You're either in a camp of business and capitalism and results, or you're in, I believe in humans and healthcare and education. And that's a dangerous juxtaposition to.
Well, absolutely. And I don't know what it's like for you in Canada at the moment, but there's a growing awareness here in Britain of they're called B Corps, conscious capitalism, purpose-driven organisations. There's a whole movement here of people who are out there doing really interesting things, producing really great products, really great services. So from that sense, they're capitalists. They are there to sell a product for more than it costs them and create profit. Absolutely. Nothing wrong with that. But as you say, the way they're doing that is focused much more on answering questions about but what's the product we're selling? And is this a product that's really going to help people? Is this a product that's going to improve the quality of people's lives or reduce an environmental impact? Is it going to reduce some pain in society? So I think for me, this is the real challenge. The thing I'm excited about is playing some small part in helping capitalism evolve.
Yeah.
It's not about throwing it out, because capitalism speaks to a lot of really important parts of human nature.
Absolutely. And societal success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like capitalism can often bring people quite explicitly out of poverty, out of challenging situations. So that in and of itself needs to be, as you say, kind of redefined, right?
Oh, look, there's a fascinating book I read over Christmas called Enlightenment Now by a guy called Stephen Pinkerton. And he's an economist, and he's assembled a bookload of data in all sorts of domains that basically shows that by almost any count you want to take, with one exception, the world is getting better.
Yeah.
We're getting healthier. We're living longer. We're suffering less disease. There is less warfare. There is more prosperity than there ever has been in human society. Now, that has been driven by capitalism. The big downside is the environment.
Yeah.
The big downside of capitalism is that its impact on the natural world is catastrophic.
Yeah.
So by every measure bar one, we're benefiting from capitalism. The big one that's going to mess us up big time is environmental crisis.
Yeah. And to tie this analogy of bringing something forward, as a staunch environmentalist and a capitalist, I mean, this is what my friends are like, well, who are you? Like, are you on this team or are you on this team? I'm like, well, I just believe in these things. And yeah, they flirt with both sides of the spectrum, you know, is that I believe that it is necessary for individuals to make choices that are more in line with accountability. I see generally in our societies where we can blame the big corporations, the big capitalists for polluting the environment. And yet we as consumers vote with our dollar every single time. And we have purely that free will and the choice and the economic voting power to say, wait a second, I'm carrying out boxes of plastic water bottles, and yet I point fingers at capitalists. If every person did a small thing, that capitalistic organization with this practice wouldn't be in business anymore.
Well,
and so there's that balance of the individual, the small teams or communities, and then the pressure on organizations to become more consciously.
Oh yeah, and I'm excited because I think there's momentum building around that. There was an article in the news here today that a company called AXA, who are actually one of my clients, they've decided that they're going to divest from all fossil fuel coal investments over the next 10 years or so. That's a big lever to pull. You know, if that means that these companies that are doing bad stuff are going to have to think, that's a message. Hey, our shares are dropping. Money's being pulled out. What do we do about this? So, but at the same time, if that nudges them to do something different, terrific. So for me, capitalism is part of the solution. Not the way it is now, but it's got to be part of the solution. So being more, both in terms of the experience of people, where we started the conversation, make more human places, but also in terms of more purposeful and being more thoughtful, more accountable. If I'm a company, what am I producing? What's my service or what's my product in the world, and what's its impact? And am I helping my people feel and really able to do work that they can sign up to and think, yeah, this is good work. I'm proud to work with this company. I work with good people. We do good work. And you know what? The product we produce, it's great. Yeah.
That's a great ideal state that I think anybody would want to, if you're going to, you know, we all need to work. And why wouldn't we want it to be as meaningful and rewarding as possible?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So for you, Jonathan, I guess, I mean, we got pretty big, pretty fast, but even taking all of that into context, I have, I guess, a two-part question. First off, I'm interested in just what's the biggest challenge for you bringing this, you know, mindset and passion around this when you're working with existing organizations, whether it be in the sports field or in the corporate field. And then I guess the flip side is that, where do you see the most opportunity? Where do you see a little bit of momentum where you're seeing that shift? So biggest opportunity, and then the biggest.
For me, The biggest challenge is an internal one. And I think this comes back to the question of accountability, but I think it's really tough to be as honest with myself as I'd like to be. So, for instance, would be we're talking to a big company in Australia about going out to do a leadership program for them. Now, on the plus side, that's terrific. I'm an Australian. I get to fly back home. That'll be to see friends. It'll be a good piece of work. But then I thought, well, hang on. Like you, I pride on myself being an environmentalist, and I'm thinking, well, hang on. That would be, I don't know, 6 flights to and from Australia this year. What's the carbon footprint of that? The company we're working with is involved in natural gas. Okay, do I really want to be working with a company that's kind of one of the bad guys at the moment? So for me, that personal dilemma of how do I manage my own ethical desires with the pragmatic reality of having to make a living and everything else is really tough.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the same challenge that's faced by everyone in whatever business they run. How do they balance that? So for me, that's the challenge.
And it's kind of like, if you think of, what comes to mind for me is if you think of that standard sort of William Bridges curve, right? The transitions of ending through neutral to beginning, that as a society, and even as you articulate that, and I can relate to that feeling too, we're in that neutral space of, I have this utopian vision, I know what I want, and yet we're still kind of operating here, and we kind of got a foot in both the past and the future, and I do have to make a living, and I have, so there is a lot of ambiguity, and you got to learn how to surf a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for me, it's good to be reminded that that's true for me, and it's true for everyone.
Yeah.
So how do I embody that? How do I role model that? How do I push my own boundaries? Because if I'm going to be impactful with my clients, then I need to manage that for myself. The positive, it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, me and my business partners went to a conference in Brighton in the UK called the Meaning Conference. It's great. Look it up online. And it was all about this sort of thing. And I went to a talk there, and one of the speakers was a guy who had a design agency, designed brochures, t-shirts, branding, all that sort of stuff. And he was a bit of a hippie. And it was really interesting because he told the story of his company, and he's been quite environmentally aware for a long time.
Yeah.
And he's got to the stage now where when a company starts to engage with him, he'll talk to them about their brand and what they want and positioning and everything else. But he's really willing to challenge them. And he gave an example of he was asked to do the branding of a company. He sat down with them and said, look, I think your company's really cool. We can do this and this. But environmentally, you're crap. You need to get your act together. And they said, what? But you're a branding, you're a marketing, you're a design guy. We just want a website. We don't want... But they listened to him. Tell us more. Tell us more. And he got them thinking about this, and they started to make some changes. So I thought, isn't that interesting? He stepped out of his kind of role of I'm the website guy and said, hey, what are you doing about this?
Yeah.
And that led to some change. So I took great comfort from the fact that, well, maybe it's easier than it feels. Maybe it's a matter of just asking a question or pointing people's direction at things, and maybe people are starting to be ready to be woken up a bit more.
Yeah. And one of the things that in accordance with that is I feel so passionately is whenever we're working as a trusted advisor, a trusted partner with an organization, we should be connecting the dots for them. We should be not just looking at the problem that we have been brought into, but we should be looking at that problem in the context of their whole organization. Because often the solutions are there, like, and so I do think, and that's a paradigm shift too, because we've tried to do that with some clients and like, whoa, stay in your lane. And others are like, cool, we didn't notice that connection actually. So that too, to your point, is a great opportunity to think about the evolving and, quite frankly, simpler and more efficient and better return on partnering with consultancies of whatever subject matter expertise, so that they come in and look at your business, right? They look at it this way instead of in isolation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And when I was thinking about preparing for this call, the two things that struck me to draw out is this point about, as humans, if we're going to bring our best self out, we need the right environment and support and the awareness to see people as people. So that's the one thing. And the other one is this: it's about doing meaningful work, because again, if under pressure our brains take us into a little narrow silo and we just get focused on delivering my task the way I've been told to do. So anything that helps this happen and helps someone, whether a leader or not, to think about, oh, what's the bigger picture and what's going on over there and how do these dots connect? And can I see a connection between my work and something that's meaningful? That brings the human back into it.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to wrap up our conversation than what you just said. So thank you for saying that. It really took our meandering conversation and just tied it up with a beautiful bow.